So here is the same data. This is exactly the same data. It's just been standardized. Okay, and again, if you are skeptical about, statistics and how we statistically manipulate data sometimes, well, you take your statistics course and you'll see there's a pretty simple statistical technique to put two different variables that are ranging over, dramatically different ranges of variation, to put them on the same scale so that you can make comparisons. Otherwise, it's kind of like comparing the free throw shooting averages of basketball players using different sized basketballs. Right? That would hardly be a fair comparison, right? If some of them are using beach balls and some of them are using regulation sized basketballs, right? It would be an unfair comparison. So we kind of have to find a way to get them on the same scale of measurement. Right? And that's what I've done here. I've just standardized them, relatively simple to do mathematically, but the basic point is that now they both have the same average, which is 0. I told you a little bit earlier that the average approval rating over that 50-year period was about 50. Okay? The average unemployment rate over that period was probably about 4.5%, maybe close to 5%. So now they both have an average of 0, and this is one standard deviation below the average. This is one standard deviation above the average. Forget all that, okay, and just look at the trend lines, okay? And what you're looking for is there a consistent pattern, not a perfect pattern, but is there a consistent pattern where when unemployment is relatively high, presidential approval is relatively low? Or to say a little bit differently, look at the graph and see on those points where the red trend line is above average, is the blue trend line below average? Or vice versa. When the red trend line is below average, is the blue trend line above average? I see a couple of you nodding your heads yes. Okay?
Right there in that one area, isn't it?
Well, again, it's not a perfect thing. Okay? I don't want, I tried to make clear that we're not going to suggest that it's a perfect correlation. It's never going to be a perfect correlation. But in general, you find that that's true, right? I think that's what you all meant when you were nodding your heads. So, for example, here early in the period, at the very beginning of this 50-year period, during the Eisenhower presidency, unemployment was relatively low. Remember that? It was about 3%. So that's about 2 standard deviations below the average. And look at Eisenhower's approval ratings, well above the average, right? That would suggest some evidence, some support for our hypothesis that these things are inversely related. And then look at, throughout just various points here. Obviously, unemployment is high here. It's relatively low. Approval ratings are relatively low here. Same here, same here. There are a couple of exceptions, aren't there? Where's one exception?
That one section where the blue line dips below the -1 and the
Stop me when I get to it.
Keep going, stop.
Okay? All right. So, based on unemployment being really pretty low here, this is the late 1960s. This is like 1968, that period in there, where the economy was really pretty healthy. 1960s, the economy was really pretty good.
And then there was another.
Inflation was low, unemployment was low, the economy was growing, etc. But look at LBJ's approval ratings. LBJ's approval ratings are way down here. They should be up here, right?
And there's another.
Hold on just a second, okay? If our hypothesis is that presidential approval trends along with, although inversely, trends along with the unemployment rate, how would we explain this, right? Like what's going on here? Oh, there must be some other events going on that are mitigating the effects of the healthy economy. For example, the escalation of tensions in Vietnam, right? So there are these events that occur, sort of these random events that occur over the timeline that also have an effect on the president's approval ratings. It's not just the performance of the economy. That's really the point I'm trying to get to. So now, when is the next one?
The next one is.
Here's one here.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. That's the early 1990s. What does the red trend line indicate? It's above average, right? Yeah, the economy was in a recession at that time. Okay? But look at, this is George Bush 1. The elder Bush, his approval ratings are way up there. I wonder why. because that was the first time we went into Iraq and kicked Saddam's butt, right? So Desert Storm operation, right? That's right. And then it was Desert Storm, right? So the immediate effect of that military action was to inflate the president's approval ratings. But look, it was pretty short-lived, wasn't it? Because look what happens to George H.W. Bush's approval ratings. They come crashing down pretty quickly. And I think that's a testament to the effect of the economy being in recession. Because by the time you get to the 1992 presidential election, his approval ratings are so low that he loses his re-election bid to Bill Clinton, right? So in other words, what I'm saying is that most analysts would tell you that you have these events that occur along the timeline that have an effect one way or another on the president's approval rating, but sort of the most important variable all along there is how people perceive the performance of the economy. In other words, their pocketbook. If they're worried about their job, if they're worried that they're going to lose their job and they're not going to be able to feed their family, then it's probably going to show up in the president's approval ratings once the effects of some of these random events wear off. Like, look what happened with George W. Bush after the September 11th terrorist attacks. He's way up there at about 90%. Okay, and then look what happens as the unemployment rate starts to dip. Okay, below the trend line at the end of the graph here, right? Look, his approval ratings come down. You also have the effects of the prolonged action in Iraq. I don't know if that seems like ancient history to you, but it wasn't that many years ago. Back in 2004, 2005, as the war in Iraq began to, sort of wear people down a little bit. Those initial effects, those euphoric effects that people had about going in Afghanistan and toppling the Taliban and then going into Iraq and so on, that it starts to come down. Okay? The decay effect of these specific events can be pretty dramatic sometimes. I mean, look what happened to Jimmy Carter. Poor Jimmy Carter, right? Everybody hates Jimmy Carter, maybe for good reason. But look at Jimmy Carter. Oh, what's the wrong version? Hold on just a second. Here's Jimmy Carter. Look at his approval ratings in in 1979. Okay, notice he's way down here. He's down around 30%, and all of a sudden they spike. He goes up almost 30 percentage points, right? Almost to 60%, which would have been very high for Jimmy Carter, right? But look what happened, by the way, the Iranian hostage crisis. That's when those, whatever it was, 56 hostages were taken in Tehran. But look at the decay effect. Look how dramatically and how quickly that comes down. Right? It's pretty temporary. Right?
The reason for that is because I guess when the hostages were taken, everyone looked to Carter to fix it, and then when he couldn't do anything about it,
seemed like he was incompetent to fix it. Right? Yeah, so the immediate effect is kind of a rally effect.
And then that whole, towards the end, it kind of goes up. That's when he was with the peace talks with Egypt.
Well, this graph, actually, that's earlier in his term, but you have to be a little careful in the way that you read this graph, because actually what's going on here is you have a little bit of a spike. It may have been, in the case of Carter, it may have been just a relief that the term was coming to an end. It's like, it's possible, I don't know. You have to get somebody who has actually poured over that data from that period, but I suspect that could be a possibility.